Les changements climatiques provoquent une hausse de l'insécurité alimentaire, des épidémies, des migrations et des conflits. Des millions de personnes sont affectées. Il devient urgent de renoncer à l'exploitation des énergies fossiles. Le charbon est l'énergie la plus émettrice de CO2, mais sa production n'a cessé d'augmenter depuis 2000. Pour un pays en développement comme l'Afrique du Sud, dont le système énergétique est fondé sur le charbon, s'en passer représente un lourd défi. Nous sommes à une date charnière. En décembre 2015, la France va accueillir la 21e conférence des Nations Unies sur le changement climatique. L'objectif, limiter les émissions mondiales de gaz à effet de serre et lutter contre les impacts du réchauffement. Pourtant, au même moment, des entreprises et banques françaises continuent de polluer les pays en développement.
La France a fait de 2015 l'année du climat et François Hollande lance des appels à l'international pour l'action de tous contre le changement climatique. Mais il faudrait d'abord que la France balaye devant sa porte. En tant que pays développé, la France doit faire le plus gros des efforts en termes de réduction des émissions de CO2. Mais elle doit aussi mettre fin à ses soutiens à des projets climaticides et plutôt soutenir les pays en développement à transformer leur système énergétique. Alors aujourd'hui, on en est loin. GDF Suez et EDF, deux entreprises dans lesquelles l'État est actionnaire, construisent de nombreuses centrales à charbon dans le monde. Et notamment en Afrique du Sud, alors que plus de 90% de l'électricité est produite à partir du charbon et que le pays est déjà un gros émetteur de CO2, GDF Suez veut construire la centrale Tabametsi de 1200 MW. Et cette centrale va émettre des millions de tonnes de CO2 pendant plus de 40 ans. Et le pire, c'est qu'elle arrive 6 ans après deux gigantesques projets charbon également soutenus par la France.
En 2009, année de la conférence sur le changement climatique à Copenhague, les banques françaises ont financé pour près de 2 milliards d'euros les deux centrales de Koussilé et de Medupi en Afrique du Sud, destinées à devenir les 3e et 4e plus grandes centrales au monde. Elles ont notamment financé, avec une garantie de l'État français, l'exportation des turbines fabriquées et vendues par Alstom. Ces deux centrales, elles émettront 65 millions de tonnes de dioxyde de carbone par an, c'est-à-dire environ 1/5 des émissions induites par la combustion d'énergie fossile de la France, et de quoi augmenter de 17% les émissions totales de l'Afrique du Sud, rendant quasiment impossible pour ce pays de tenir ses engagements de réduction d'émissions de CO2.
South Africa would meet its climate change targets if only Medupi and Kusile power stations are running. So if we add all of Eskom's other 14 power stations and the new independent power producers and the industry-owned coal-fired power stations, South Africa will never meet its mitigation targets to the UNFCCC.
En raison de l'urgence climatique, certains bailleurs publics commencent à mettre un terme à leur soutien au secteur du charbon. Les banques françaises et GDF Suez, eux, ils sont toujours fortement engagés. D'après eux, le charbon est nécessaire pour répondre aux besoins en électricité des pays en développement et lutter contre la pauvreté. Pourtant, en Afrique du Sud, le développement du secteur du charbon fait grimper les émissions de gaz à effet de serre du pays et surtout ne profite pas aux populations et encore moins aux 46% qui vivent toujours sous le seuil de pauvreté.
We're a developing country, so we're still growing. We have to look at the economic growth of our country and poverty alleviation. And South Africa has a lot of coal. So we can't, if you look at the overall objectives of the new development plan for the country, the overall objective is poverty eradication.
The issue of energy access in South Africa is a pressing one. The reality in South Africa is that 18% of this country's electricity is used by residential users. An estimated 60% actually goes to industrial users. So what that means is that not only is this country addicted to coal and investing in mega new coal-fired power stations and expanding our coal mines to feed those coal-fired power stations, but that electricity is not going to the people who do not have access to electricity at the moment.
Indawo esihlala kuyo sibaningi kakhulu, although ungakhona uku-estimate singakanani but sibaningi kakhulu. So ugesi asinawo vele at all lana kithi. sisebenzisa uparaffin. So uparaffin nawo uyasilimaza impela ngoba iliter is 12.50. Yes. Sometimes sesebenzise imbawula, so sithole amalahle mahala lapha emayini, isponsorisa ngamalahle mahala. Sisebenzisa nawo lawo malahle ukuze impilo iqhubeke. I'm very close to the power station because iseduze kakhulu nayo khona lana, but we don't have any electricity. So thina izakhamuzi esihlala lana asbenefit ukupower lapha yani power station. Even imisebenzi evelayo sometimes ivela abantu abangaphandle thina izakhamuzi lana basibeka ngaphandle asbenefit kule power station thina. Ngisho nje ngithi i-power station ethi Duva Power ayisizi ngalutho kangako.
Most of the people who live both in urban and rural areas do not have access to electricity. The few who have access to electricity cannot afford it. So they get cut off the grid and therefore stay for a very long time without electricity until such time they can afford it. As earlier indicated, that most of the people pay a whole lot of price. Now, the argument that Eskom is making that they build these power stations for the communities, it's false because community people pay more for the electricity as compared to industries. So in essence, individual households are subsidizing industries for their electricity.
As far as we can tell, although everything seems to be very secret and they try to keep these pricing agreements as secret as they can, we're told that it's in the region of about 12 cents a kilowatt hour that these two aluminium smelters are paying for this electricity. Now this is coming that's at a far lower price than what's actually costing Eskom to generate electricity. So we are seeing Eskom make a major loss out of those contracts.
Le plus paradoxal est que ceux vivant près des mines et des centrales ne bénéficient pas plus de l'électricité produite à partir de charbon. Dans ces zones où manquent de nombreux services de base, les populations souffrent d'un environnement très pollué et extrêmement dangereux pour la santé.
There are significant emissions, both in terms of carbon dioxide, which is what people talk about in terms of contributing to climate change, but there are also lots of other emissions. For example, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, mercury is also a result of burning coal to produce electricity. So in combination, these emissions are not only deadly for the climate, but they're also deadly for human beings because they have huge impacts in terms of human health, specifically when it comes to cardiovascular disease, sometimes cancer.
Those particles are the pH in the plant, that is in the plant. I don't know how to explain the pH in full, but it's like a smoke, it's a dust, it's a fume like that is flowing all over the plant. So it's there, you can see it, you can smell it, like you can smoke, inhale it, like, yeah, I can say you can even feel it because it's like a coal ash, like I can say. It's grayish in color, yeah, and it damages skins as well. Yeah, not only the lungs and everything and the nostrils and what, but it also damages the skins.
When you look at our coal-fired power stations and you look at the emissions from those, you have to bear in mind that behind every single of those power stations you have a multiple of coal mines with very significant impact on the local communities, local residents who are living with dust, who are living with poor water quality, who are living with blasting around them, who are losing their land, who are losing access to heritage areas like where graves of their ancestors. I mean, this is the common story. This is the usual story.
The TP is more and more coming because he's still staying at MNS with the dust, nearer than the dust. And then in there, there's the water, the acidic water. They call it AMD, acidic mine drainage. Young boys or ladies are playing here. They swim in here every day. And then our government is sitting there, swimming in the swimming pool, eating a pizza go into whatever they want with a fancy car. Though we have 4 taps, sometimes they can take 2 weeks, no water. Don't you think people are going to come and drink this water? They will, because they don't have water.
We have a province like Mpumalanga that's almost entirely under prospecting and mining rights for coal. We are not talking about underground mines, we're talking about open cast coal mines throughout that province. Mpumalanga also contains the headwaters of some of our most important rivers. So in addition to air quality problems that we already have on the Highveld, we're also seeing very, very significant impact on water quality through acid mine drainage, which is not being addressed.
We can already see that it's a very big environmental problem. On the Mpumalanga Highveld, places like Emalahleni, Witbank, Middelburg, we see the impact of acid mine drainage on the water resources. We see it on those two big municipal dams in the area, for example. And because it's the start of the water that comes down to Gauteng, the start of the Vaal River, we can really expect big trouble in future. And it's difficult and it's expensive to deal with acid mine drainage. We are already spending billions on acid mine drainage from the gold mines, but many people don't realize that the coal mines is the same problem and over time will be a bigger problem. You have, because the coal is so shallow and it's easy to get to the coal, you have thousands of little coal mines. So you could have a few holes on a farm and that whole farm is being washed over by acid mine drainage. Just because that hole has been made in the wrong place, the rocks have been put back in such a way that they get oxygen, they get water, and so it's a permanent acid mine engine, and there's thousands of these little acid mine engines all over the coal fields. It's a very big risk.
Le Waterberg pourrait demain connaître les mêmes pollutions que le Mpumalanga. Après Medupi, la France entend y développer la centrale de Thabametsi. Son projet contesté par les populations locales aggraverait notamment le problème de l'eau dans une région déjà aride.
One of the main issues with the plant is that there is not enough water to support another independent power producer based on coal in the Waterberg. So a large amount of water will have to be shipped up, piped up from Johannesburg to the Waterberg, which will be one of the most extensive water transferal projects in the world, and also cost the taxpayer a lot of money.
The idea that's being thrown around, that we're being told, is that we would be using acid mine water from the Gauteng region, which would then go into the Hartbeespoort Dam, from the Hartbeespoort Dam into the Crocodile River, and from the Crocodile River then via pipelines come to Lephalale. And the mines and the power stations would then use this water for their operations, and the general population, the residents, would use the clean water which comes from the Mokolo Dam.
Mais les populations qui n'ont aujourd'hui pas accès à l'eau courante ne font pas partie des plans de développement des réseaux de distribution de l'eau.
There is no water, enough water. We want to have a purified water like in town. Because the water that we are drinking here, we are drinking the water from the borehole. We're supposed to get a purified water like each and every citizen of South Africa, like in town. We want to also drink the purified water.
The villagers aren't getting water at all from the system, so they're making use of borehole water. Often when you get to the villages, there's actually no water. At this stage, there's no plan to extend the pipeline to the villages.
Les populations du Waterberg ont donc de bonnes raisons de craindre que leurs droits et les ressources naturelles soient à leur tour sacrifiés comme au Mpumalanga. Cependant, d'après les entreprises du secteur du charbon comme Eskom et Engie, les dernières avancées technologiques permettent désormais de produire du charbon propre, les fameuses clean coal technologies.
We're always looking at, if you had to build new coal plants, how would you improve it? How would you make sure it's more efficient? You know, it uses less water, it produces less emissions and those kind of things. Any new coal development will be clean coal development.
There's no such thing as clean coal. Coal will always be a source of pollution when it is utilized, from taking it out of the ground through to the point of end use, whether that's in an electricity power plant or whether it's in, like a lot of households in South Africa, still burning directly coal fireplaces in the home. So while there are ways to reduce the amounts of impacts of burning coal, for example, in a power plant, you can put on flue gas desulfurization, and that is marketed as a clean coal technology. What it is a pollution reduction technology. So it doesn't make coal clean, it just means it's slightly less problematic.
Le charbon propre est donc un mythe. Il s'agit seulement de diminuer légèrement l'impact environnemental d'une activité gravement polluante. Encore faudrait-il que les entreprises si promptes à vanter le clean coal le mettent en place.
Currently, the argument is that they cannot afford the best coal, but also because most of the mines export the best coal to European and Asian markets. And therefore, Eskom is being given the coal, I think, what they say they can afford, which is the high sulfur content coal. And yeah, like Ella indicated, it's dirty, and therefore it means the emissions are also very dirty.
We were very worried about the pollution which would emanate from Medupi, especially if you take into consideration that it's not just Medupi. You have to take into consideration that it's Medupi and Exxaro and Matimba and the cumulative effect of all three of them. And we were actually told then that we needn't worry because they were going to install flue gas desulfurization units, and that they would be installed basically, that's what we understood, before Medupi started operating. And we were quite surprised towards the end of last year when we realized that Eskom was now applying for to not install the flue gas desulfurization units from the beginning, but to only start installing them 6 years after each unit was being commissioned.
Many of our largest polluters are applying to be exempt or to have their compliance with those standards postponed. That includes Eskom and a number of other big polluters in South Africa.
In the area where Kusile is to be located, it's very polluted. And so there was little chance maybe of getting away without pollution abatement. And so there was an admission that that was needed. However, for Medupi, in an area which is not so polluted, the argument appears to be that because it's clean, we can pollute it, rather than you would expect a more progressive argument, which is if it's clean, we don't want to make it worse for people.
Pollution, mort prématurée, une question demeure. Pourquoi la France, ses entreprises et ses banques construisent-elles toujours des centrales à charbon en Afrique du Sud? N'y a-t-il pas d'alternative?
Coal 3 is essentially it's a backup measure. I don't think Eskom or the country want to build Coal 3. I think from an environmental point of view, it's probably not a good idea. But we may be forced to do it because of the growth in the need for electricity and the fact that there's nothing else that we could actually do short term that would actually meet that requirement.
When they started building Medupi, it was meant to be online, I think in 2010, and it now won't be online until 2015. So there's a large interest bill attached to that. But it was also meant to cost 80 billion rand, and estimates are now over 120 billion rand and still rising. The electricity that Medupi is going to produce has been estimated by the National Energy Regulator of South Africa to be at about 97 cents per kilowatt hour, which is probably almost a third higher than the average, Eskom's average cost now. And this is in a context where renewable energy projects are coming in at 65 cents for wind or 88 cents for solar PV. And when you look at that, I mean, Eskom is really in a bind.
But those haven't come online yet, and in fact there's been huge delays, particularly in Medupi, huge problems with the contractors, specifically, in fact, Hitachi Power Africa. And as you might know, there was huge controversy over the appointment of Hitachi Power Africa to do the boilers, largely because the ANC, through its funding arm Chancellor House, had a 25% stake in Hitachi Power Africa. So the ANC, the ruling party, was actually benefiting from a government contract, and we felt that this posed a massive conflict of interest.
Des conflits d'intérêts dans le secteur du charbon? Rien de nouveau pour la société civile qui dénonce des collusions remontant au temps de l'apartheid.
I mean, the challenge that we have in South Africa is that during the apartheid days, mining houses supported the apartheid government because it was used to suppress and exploit the majority. So it is the same strategy that they are using today. They co-opt few of the political and very popular liberation leaders that are found in the ruling party and the opposition parties. They co-opt them. They turn them into their own agents. And obviously the decision will be a decision that favors the interest of the mining houses.
Alors pas d'alternative au charbon?
The decisions to continue with coal, which is a non-renewable resource, means that as you go into the future, the cost of extracting it gets higher and higher, which means that people are unable to afford the electricity that is generated. And what it seems to be happening in South Africa is we are continuing with coal instead of switching to renewable energies, where globally the prices are decreasing. So by choosing a non-renewable resource for electricity generation, we are in effect depriving citizens, particularly poorer citizens, of access to electricity and deepening poverty.
I think that the future of energy in South Africa is breaking away from this old, outdated thinking that we just need big, large power stations like Medupi and Kusile generating all the country's needs. Instead, I would far prefer to see a more dynamic energy policy that gives greater priority to smaller projects, even embedded generation, whereby we've actually got some kind of a dialogue taking place on the grid between users and generators, and a greater self-sufficiency at a household level and at a regional level, rather than relying on all of our power coming from one place in South Africa and being sent down. I'd like to see a more diverse energy mix and a more diverse energy generation plan that's more small scale and shorter lead times.
We would be better off to look for much more creative solutions. We have very good potential for renewable energies through solar power, through wind. We have the possibility to actually be a world leader in it.
We have plentiful alternatives to coal. We have some of the best renewable resources in the world, including some of the world's best insolation, the incidence of sunlight, solar energy coming in. So we could power all of South Africa, the current economy, on less than 0.1% of our land mass if we were doing just photovoltaics, for example. More than enough renewable resources to displace all of the fossil fuels. The renewable resources we have in South Africa, not only are they plentiful, but they would also provide a lot more employment if we used renewable resources rather than fossil fuels. So the case for moving away from coal and to renewables in South Africa is not based primarily on climate change. It's about local environmental quality, it's about local health, and it's about utilizing resources at a human scale rather than purely at an industrial scale.
En 2015, il n'est donc plus possible de fermer les yeux sur les impacts du charbon et de maintenir son développement en raison de l'absence d'alternatives. Les entreprises et banques françaises doivent y mettre un terme.